Splitgate might be one of the best rags to riches game stories I've ever heard. I made a video a couple of months back when they had just $10 million in funding because they'd got 2 million players. Now, those figures were massive. This was a 4-man studio, a game which had been dead for years. And yet they stuck with it, and they were incredibly rewarded. And I thought this was about as big as they were gonna go. 2 million players in just a few weeks. Their servers were crashing all over the place. They couldn't handle it. Their database was just mathematically impossible to handle the amount of players they had. They had big issues, and I hoped they worked with them, but I was just happy if they could maintain the player base they had. And I really enjoyed it. 4-man studio, dead game working on it. It's a great success story. That's all I needed to hear. And I hoped the game was there. It was innovative, which is a word I couldn't even say in my last video. So I've come along leaps and bounds as well. And I wanted it to send a message to one of the developers that you can take risks. If you're a small studio and you don't have that much money, you can actually take more risks than the bigger company, and that allows you to stand out. You can do things they wouldn't even dare do. And if it works, if you're good at what you do, you can nail it. And that was the message that I wanted to send out. And Splitgate, honestly, they just keep on sending it, because now they've actually received $100 million of funding because they've exploded 13 million players. It actually values the company at an astonishing 1.5 billion with a B valuation. They've gone from a tiny, small 4-man studio working in a room to $1.5 billion. If that's not one of the biggest success stories in gaming, honestly, I don't know what is. Things like that haven't happened since years back, where you always had your little tiny studios that just set up. But now, in the age where graphics have moved on so far, getting a game to that success is very, very difficult, and you have to have nailed the core game loop in order to get there. And Splitgate has. Now, there are some things where they've said, we really want to be the next Riot Games. And to that, the only things I can say is, do you? Do you? This may have been in 2019, but I still say again, are you sure about that? Because this isn't 2021. Honestly, I think you can pick better targets if you want to emulate a game studio, but here we are. Now, as they've gone on, they've done interviews, and I think the developer's really shown that he's got a great idea of where to go as a company and the ideas that he's founded in. He seems to share a lot of my ideas, and the fact that it goes back to sort of Quake 3 and those kind of shooters there, which honestly is an attitude which you just don't get among developers anymore. They've definitely moved on, and they look back on those times and think, we could never do that, we could never do that. We've got to make casual games for everybody, and honestly, I don't think you should. Now, I would go a little bit further than Splitgate has in sort of the level of complexity I want, but I'm still very excited about their kind of vision for the game. You see, when they started, they went with a little tiny studio and their tiny budget. They couldn't do everything. It was supposed to release in summer, the one coming up, but now they've gone back. Now they've got a bigger budget, a $1.5 billion valuation of a budget. Now they're focusing on the long term and say the game is only 25% done. They're actually taking the money and reinvesting it in the game. They're focusing on more things, more features, more ideas, because they really want to stand along the big boys. Halo, Battlefield, Call of Duty, those are the names that they want to be used side by side in, and I think they've got a chance now they've got this kind of thing. One of the reasons games die is lack of content, and Splitgate do not want that to be the reason they die out, and they've got a great way around that. But they do say that we don't need to be Fortnite tomorrow. Honestly, I'm not sure anyone wants to be a Fortnite. I don't want to be shooting someone just for them to build a 5-bedroom chateau in 2 seconds. That's not my idea of fun. And this is where his attitude changes, where he shares a lot of my ideas. They reckon that the space has been dominated by Battle Royale and hardcore options. Now, I'm not sure what he means by hardcore. If he's referring to Quake 3, I wouldn't classify that as hardcore. I think that's just an FPS. I think Quake 3 Arena and Unreal Tournament back in the day actually just perfected FPS. I think their ideas should just be wholesale copied and used in the future. Whereas hardcore for me would mean something like Squad or Armor. Those are your real hardcore shooters. Quake 3 I see very much in the middle ground. It just rewards you. The best player wins. I don't think that's hardcore at all. I see that as actually the minimum level of an FPS. He says there's a sizable demand for a good old-fashioned shooter that sits somewhere in the middle of those two options. Lots of people have been saying that Splitgate is just like Halo, but I think it's definitely had more of a Quake 3 influence. And he's aiming for somewhere between Halo and Quake 3, which is obviously a big gap to go, but adding Portal in just to make yourself stand out, it increases your tactical options so much, you'll always have players that really won't make the use of those portals. But that's their loss. The players that do will be the ones that rise to the top. And eventually, everyone will get used to them. It just really requires a change in thinking about how you think about the world in a 3D space to actually get the handle on them. And the more people do, the higher that skill level will rise. And he says, people grew up playing these games like Quake 3 Arena, and the reason the market is dead is not because they stopped loving them. No, I still see Quake 3 as one of the best FPS ever made. No one has moved the needle because there isn't a lot of innovation. There's never been something that's accessible to the masses. I'm not sure about this second part of the comment, but the first one is definitely true. When you've got such a big budget like Call of Duty, taking risk, it's too dangerous for you. You don't want to take a risk on a game and it flop because you've lost so much, but small indie devs can because they don't risk much, so why not? They're the ones that need to stand out among all the big boys with the big budgets. And the way they do that is with new innovative features. I can't say that word every time, clearly. And that is what Splitgate managed. Now, accessible to the masses, I'm not sure quite what they mean by that. I think he's trying to say that Splitgate's still casual enough that you're not going to get instantly dominated. And honestly, that, despite what I was saying before, it might be the best way. Look, the perfect game is probably Quake 3 Arena at the top, something with incredibly high skill ceiling that you'll barely ever reach, but also as a smooth entry point. Get new players on board, get them interested in the game, get them playing the game, and then they'll naturally improve and naturally start rising to that skill ceiling as it is. I think that matters. I think that's important. And if you can nail the smooth curve, rather than just having people hit a brick wall when they start and have to climb it in almost a vertical fashion, honestly, that's probably the best idea for everyone involved. Now, he does say that no 12-year-old Fortnite kid is going to play Quake Arena. I don't think that's true. I think 12 is similar to the time that I started playing Quake 3, and I liked it. The difference was the difference in mental attitude back there. You realized when you played that game, you were going to get destroyed. But you take your licks at the start, and then you'll naturally improve. You saw yourself rising up that scoreboard bit by bit by bit, and that mattered. That was satisfying. That was the game. There was none of this battle passes going for skins and everything else. And so it was actually the competition. It was improving. It was seeing yourself get better at the game visually on the scoreboard. That is what matters. That was the game loop. And that's what games are missing now. So I disagree that 12-year-olds won't play it. I think you've just got to make a game which, yes, doesn't obliterate them at the start, because they're used to just entering games and killing people nowadays. They've been spoiled. But I think if you actually get them into the starting and get them used to actually improving, getting that satisfying feeling, getting back to that competition, I think they'll be on board just as much as anyone else. But that's not where Splitgate ends, because they are trying to out Halo. When they found out that Halo isn't getting a campaign co-op and Forge mode for months. But in Halo Infinite's defense, I think this is actually the right decision. If it was a choice between delaying the game or cutting features, I think cutting features is the way forward. You get the game out, the core game out, get people playing it and get that polished. And then later on, you go back and you do the peripheral features that weren't core experiences, but are important overall. If that allows you to meet your time and still release a polished game, I think that's the right decision, and I think that's one that Battlefield should have done. Look, I don't know if Hazard Zone was what delayed it or anything else, but if cutting something like Hazard Zone could have got your game out on time, then I think that's what they should have done rather than delay it. They could always go back to Hazard Zone later and release it at a later time, especially as they've not even shown any gameplay of it. Even announcing it, quite frankly, just wasn't that important. And I think delaying your game is a really bad thing to do. I know people go, well, what do you want them to release an unfinished game? No, I think they should release a polished game on time. I don't agree with the idea that it's either delay or release an unfinished game. Those aren't your two options. There are other ways of structuring yourself as a development company, as a business, to actually give customers a good experience. But the thing is, Splitgate is coming out and out-haloing them. The fact that they're going to have a Forge-style map editor before Halo Infinte it does, which is impressive, and this is their killer feature. Yeah, they've got portals for the core game loop, but if you can get your actual customers to make your maps for you, then your player base will have an infinite amount of content, and this is why Quake 3 and other games lasted for decades. It wasn't because the developers stuck around and kept making games, it's because the players did. The maps that they made, the mods that they made were perfect. Because when you've got that many people pumping out that much content, you're going to end up with some things that can only be described as perfect ideas. It's just inevitable when you get enough people doing that, and that's what keeps your player base around. Games so often die from lack of content. Coming out with a map editor and mod tools are amazing. This really can't be underestimated for the effect that it has, and the fact that games ever lost it still amazes me. It was literally done so that they could sell their DLC packs. I think no one's going to buy DLC if you have a map editor, and I've always disagreed with it. This has always been a terrible idea. So to see a developer like this come out and just give it away is incredible. This is a really old school idea, and I think it's the way forwards. I think this was always the right path. But we've needed someone to come along and set them on that path to show the AAA developers that this is how you do business. And it really only took an indie developer to do it because, again, they can try the wacky ideas. They're the ones that test it and see if it works. And if it does, you will see that copied in other things. Or if they don't copy them, then Splitgate will just rise and rise because whoever has the best ideas wins. So I am really happy for Splitgate. This is a success story like no other. And they're coming out with ideas, innovations. Stuff like the portals was amazing, but to carry that on to do mods, map tools, and everything else, and especially to see this old school attitude of FPS and the future of gaming really excites me. So I want Splitgate to succeed. I want them to stand up with the big boys. I want them to be used in the same sentences as Call of Duty and Battlefield. Because if their name can get out there, if this attitude can really be shown to the masses, then I think everybody across the entire industry of FPS benefits. So for me, this is all great news, and I wish Splitgate the best. In fact, I only wish that other places like COD and Battlefield had learned this lesson a long, long time ago. But for now, that's it from me. If you liked the video, press like and subscribe for more videos in the future. And let me know what you think of Splitgate, their story, and what they're doing down below. But for now, that's it from me. I'll see you in the next one. And bye-bye.